is up, Bucs Nation? I'm your boy Sammer, hanging out with an invisible poppy latte. You're watching The Loose Cannons, and we are joined by Vice President of Football Operations at Barstool Sports, Stephen Cheah, good friend of ours. And hey, man, congrats on the new title, bro. That is solid.
Thank you. Thank you. I tried to mimic it after Greeny, Mike Greenberg with the Bucks, and then he just got promoted like a month later. So we're no longer VP of football
so,
ops in arms.
so you guys are kind of like battling it out. Every time you get, you're trying to one up each other here. I see.
So then I got to be assistant GM next. That's what I got to do.
I think so, man. You just gotta. It should be called Barstool Cheah at that point. Just change the
Yeah.
entire deal.
Yeah.
CheahSports.com. Anyway,
Yep.
you happen to be in New York. You live up there,
Yes.
so the
Yep.
Bucs have been in New York the majority of the week. Obviously, we know that they're going against the New York Jets in preseason WK2. It's Kyle Trask's attempt or time to shine. It's his moment to try to earn the quarterback one position, whether that's a real thing or not in terms of the
Yep.
competition itself. So you got to see them play, you got to see them practice up close and personal. Just give me kind of a lay of what you felt when you were watching these guys this week, specifically Trask and Baker, obviously.
Sure. So they did split up the reps, and that was good to see. Like right now, from what I gather, it seems like Baker is in the lead. It looked like it was Baker to start, and then Dave Canales at the press conference was like, it's pretty tight race because Trask got pretty hot. Then Trask had the day where he threw 3 picks and is, I don't want to say regressed, but like has not shown as well as that week that he was, I guess, like on fire. But he does make some plays. So, the Bucks social team put out the big throw that he had to Kalen Geiger when they're at the Giants practice facility. And then he had a couple big throws, I think, to it was the rookie Trey, number 10.
Trey Palmer.
Trey Palmer. So in that sense, like it's encouraging. You're seeing some growth from him. I think what's hard is we have these expectations because he's a second round pick and he's in year 3. You know, those guys get 4-year contracts. You kind of want to see what he's got so far. But the reality of it is he was a third team quarterback, meaning he's getting like very limited reps the first 2 years. So I think what we're seeing is he's just like really raw. Now he's finally starting to get reps. Even if he doesn't win the job and he's the number 2 guy, which is probably the most likely scenario, he's at least going to get reps in practice so we can see him hopefully improve throughout the year to the point where maybe he's playing. We'll see what happens this year with this team, but it looks like it's Baker's job to lose right now. Trask is going to get the start tomorrow at the Jets. They're kind of doing the same thing as far as Rachaad White's not playing, Tristan Wirfs isn't playing, Matt Filer's not playing. So it's kind of like an apples to apples comparison with what Baker saw against the Steelers running with the ones that do play. But it looks like it's Baker's job to lose, even though they're splitting reps, they're alternating series in practice.
So can Trask do anything in your mind, Che? Not just you as a fan, but if you say you put yourself in Jason Light's shoes or Todd Bowles' shoes, is there anything at this point that Trask can do that would change the vibe, the feel, and the direction that they are probably leading in, which is Baker Mayfield winning the job?
Yeah, I mean, I think he has to show it in the game, right? Like so far, if you look at going into training camp, I think all Bucs fans were like, all right, well, Dave Canales said whoever turns it over the least is going to most likely win the job. Right now, if you look on paper, Baker has turned it over more. So you would think Trask is the guy. Baker's also pushing the ball down the field a little bit more. He has a little bit more command of the offense. I mean, the guy started like 69 games, I think, in his career. So he has that experience where he can just kind of step in and be a guy. I mean, we saw it last year when he was with the Rams. He signed with the team midweek, started, I think that was on Monday night or Sunday night, and he leads them to a win, like as a starting quarterback with a new team, new playbook, new everything. So I think when you look at it, Todd Bowles, if I had to guess, probably wants to lean with a guy who has some experience just because this is a very critical year for him too. Like if they come out and lay an egg, you have to wonder about his job security. I hope certainly the team plays well and he continues to be the coach for a long time. But when you look at, the 30,000-foot view, I don't know that the Glazers, like the Bucs underperformed last year and he was the head coach. He obviously was put in a tough situation with BA leaving not at the normal time frame, and he's not, doesn't really have the full runway to be a head coach. But now it's his show, so we'll see what he can do. I don't necessarily know that he's set up for immediate success, but hopefully I'm wrong. And the vibe being around the team this week, everyone that I talk to thinks that the Bucs are going to be better than what the line is or what the national, media thinks, which is over under 6.5 wins.
While they were up there that first day in practice with the Jets, man, massive news obviously with Russell Gage ends up basically tearing his knee apart.
Yep.
Season-ending injury. We
Yep.
haven't really gotten to see him be the guy that we signed him when we decided to bring him to Tampa. Obviously, we saw a talented guy, a guy that made plays in Atlanta against us even. So we haven't really gotten to see him. It doesn't look like we are probably going to see him again. Maybe with the way the contract's set up, he might be back next year just because it doesn't make sense to cut him at any point in that sense.
Yep.
But now that there's an opening there at wide receiver 3. It used to be the competition for the 4th spot. You got Trey Palmer, you got Geiger, you got Devin Tompkins. They haven't brought in anybody from the outside. Like I think people keep talking about Jarvis Landry because of his connection with Baker. Do you see any one of these guys kind of elevating themselves, not only in this game and in this week in practice, but kind of leading up into week 1? Has anyone stood out, or do you see any one of those guys elevating themselves over the rest for that spot?
Sure. I mean, shout out to our guy, Trevor Sickman at Tampa Bay Trey. But Trey Palmer's looked awesome. Like, he went up against Sauce Gardner, beat him a couple times. He's been the guy that's consistently making plays, and you love to see that, from a very late round draft pick. You're not really expecting immediate production, but so far he has been really, really good and shining above the rest of the field that you mentioned. Like, obviously Mike and Chris are going to be the starters, but at third wide receiver there is certainly an opening. I would be surprised if they brought in a third guy, like an established veteran, like a Jarvis Landry. If you think about, like, what is the goal for this season? Like, I don't think too many people outside of like Carlton Davis are expecting this team to compete for a Super Bowl. That certainly is every fan's hope, is that they can and they will be playing in February. But I think the best thing we can do is develop young guys, which is something that would have been great in the past. I would have loved to see Kyle Trask a little bit more developed. I would have loved to see some other younger guys a little bit more developed at this point. So let's play the young guys and see what they got. And maybe they're going to show out. Maybe Trey Palmer is going to be an immediate impact. He's going to be a guy where it's like, okay, now we really do have like the best receiver room in the league. And that's possible if he plays to, way higher than his draft status would indicate. So I don't think it's a total lost cause with Russell Gage after the year. Definitely a bummer. He's a guy who doesn't really have an injury history before coming here, has a couple, nagging hamstring. He had a really bad concussion in the playoff game that messed him up for several weeks, and now is back. And then I saw the injury. It was pretty bad. And you could tell immediately, because not only, in a chippy practice, it didn't really start to get chippy at that point, but it was a scrimmage against the Jets. It was just a simple out route. He made the pass, or he made the catch, and then just immediately crumpled, banging the ground. Everybody, Jets and Bucs, on a knee within like 20 seconds. Somber looks, and then he gets carted off, and he's a little bit teary-eyed as he's coming off the field. So you kind of knew. I'm no doctor, but it's like, all right, he's probably done for the year.
We definitely hope he makes some sort of comeback, comes back on the field at least. Whether it's here or not doesn't make a difference for it, as long as he comes back, right? So kind of moving back, I feel like, and this is not a shot at Russell Gage, but I feel like it's almost going to be a blessing in disguise, because Gage brings his own set of skills, but Trey Palmer and Devin Tompkins, they have their own very unique skill sets that we haven't seen here in a very long time, maybe since Joey Galloway. These guys are just fast. When you get the ball in their hands, they move, they get up the field. They got yak that we not a yak-based offense the last 3-4 years since BA has been here. So it'll kind of be a change of pace and it'll be a little bit refreshing. And like you're saying, you're not drafting a guy in the 1st or the 6th round and hoping that they play wide receiver 1 snaps. You're not putting it all on their backs. You're not asking them to be OBJ from day one. You're asking them to be wide receiver 3. I mean, That's not that bad. It's not that heavy of a load to carry. You get to learn from Mike. You get to learn from Chris. I mean, it's kind of a perfect scenario to develop a guy and bring a guy along. And like you said, eventually you got these studs. And I think Devin Tompkins plays like a dog. He just goes out there. He doesn't seem to slow down no matter what. The punt returns, such a fucking refreshing scene to see him go up the field as opposed to the guy we had before that. And then you got Palmer, who's just he looks smooth. He makes great catches. He seems to have a rapport with all these guys because they've gotten so many snaps with Trask and Baker. So I think it ends up being a good thing, as sad as that sounds from Russell Gage's perspective, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, how quickly you guys forget about wide receiver one, Scotty Miller. The body's not even cold. I know
Sorry.
that Trey Palmer's wearing number 10, but I mean, this was our burner. This was the guy who, made the big catch at the end of the first half against the Packers in the NFC Championship game to really put us over the top. And you guys just referencing Joey, right back to Joey Galloway.
Listen, all I'm saying is, look, they said it. Somebody, Trey Palmer could be what they hoped Scotty Miller could one day be, which is, more than just a one-trick pony, and could catch the ball going across the middle, could make catches that were contested and not fall to the ground. And Trey Palmer, he's wearing number 10. I've quickly forgotten the other number 10. This is my number 10 now. We have another wide receiver one development. We don't know. Real quick, Che, we got a $5 super chat from Pelagic Computer, who says, "I'm just here to get a Giovanni Bernard," which I'm sure you were.
Mr. Giovanni Bernard.
There it is.
A delightful moment from camp is that I saw Tristan Wirfs, and he's a big fan of the Geo call, so we got to do one together, which was nice.
That is dope. Yeah. Speaking of Tristan Wirfs, going against a defense like the Jets in practice and in scrimmage is, obviously he's going against guys with the Bucs that are pretty damn good in terms of pass rushing, but going against a defense like that, probably a really good thing for a guy who's trying to learn the ropes at left tackle. What'd you see from him going against, these studs over there on that side, and with the way Saleh likes to call defense, or the way he likes to have his defense run very aggressive, very after the quarterback type of, similar to what Todd Bowles does. But how did he look kind of going against these guys and kind of getting his way worked up to being best left tackle in football at some point?
Sure. I mean, he's definitely getting more comfortable. I thought his press conference that he did, whatever it was, like a month ago, was so good and so insightful, because it is. And I talked to him about this, and I interviewed him like years ago and asked him about switching sides left to right, because he did play two different sides at Iowa. He did play mainly right tackle, but I believe as a freshman he played left tackle. And he said it's like wiping your ass with the other hand. And that is, if you can imagine, that's pretty difficult, assuming most people are, one side
I use a
guys for their life.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there you go. But it's not necessarily the most natural thing. So not only are all calls that are, even numbers, odd numbers now, or vice versa, but you're using, and Baldy had a great breakdown of it, you're using your complete opposite hand, doing it something on the complete opposite side, you're shuffling the other way. So it's not the easiest thing to pick up. And I think that it was very insightful for him to be like, yeah, I struggle to think that I can do that really. And, he talked to the Bucs sports psychologist and things like that. But it is kind of a window into a guy who, when he had his first training camp, he was getting whooped by Shaq and JPP every day, and he would think like, I don't know if I can do this. And then he turned out to be like an all-pro caliber right tackle that year. So it remains to be seen. They didn't get like the most reps. The pass protection was better than I would have thought coming off the Steelers game. Obviously, he didn't play in that game, but the pass protection as a whole was a little bit better than I would have thought. But on the other side, the Bucs D-line looked great. And maybe that speaks to the Jets were not very good, and they were shuffling a lot of guys, and a bunch of guys were out on their offensive line. But the Bucs got after Aaron Rodgers a lot. So while the pass protection certainly still a work in progress, and I don't know that we're going to see a huge difference tomorrow night. We're taping this on Friday, but tomorrow night against the Jets, because the left side is out. Jensen didn't travel with the team. Matt Filer is not playing. Tristan Wirfs is not playing. So we're going to see a lot of the right side, and that's where the focus will be with Cody Mock and Luke Gedeke. But hopefully by the time we get to Minnesota, we see these guys start to gel.
So we were talking about this earlier, Latte and Stank and myself. We were talking about how it's a little odd that we're not going to get to see not only the quarterback that they choose, but the entire offensive unit get their feet wet with the system. They're all learning something brand new here. It's not like Mike Evans has been running this forever. And to kind of just go through some live action together in the preseason before week one, practice is practice. You can scrimmage all you want. There's still a difference that goes from, that to an actual game. And I think it's a little odd. I'm not a big fan of it. I understand that they're just trying to get guys to week one and not hurt anybody.
Yep.
But I'm curious what you think of that whole avoid the injuries and not get your reps in. If it's a team that's been together, I get it. But this is a whole new offense.
Yeah, I certainly hear that. And, we're at 3 preseason games instead of the usual 4. Starters usually typically wouldn't play the 4th. I'd be surprised if the starters play the 3rd at this point. I do tend to agree with you. If I'm being objective and looking from like a longer view, the field, and I know that they replaced the field this year at MetLife, but it's still an artificial field that like a lot of teams have gotten a lot of guys hurt on. Kyle Shanahan famously, like they had a bunch of guys go on IR during that game that they played at the Jets or the Giants. I think it was at the Jets. So in that instance, like I wouldn't want to see any of our guys get hurt at the MetLife Stadium field in week 2 of the preseason. That being said, I'm a little bit nervous about Minnesota. Like they're a team that went to the playoffs last year. They're going to be in their home stadium wearing their throwbacks, getting after us week 1. Hopefully the offensive line is up for the task, and we have a lot of young, unproven guys for the most part, especially on the right side of the offensive line. And we've got injuries. Is Ryan Jensen going to be ready? He hasn't really practiced. They say he's going to practice next week a little bit and maybe alternate days. Is he going to be ready to go to week 1? If not, what happens with the backup center? Is it Hainsey? Is it Leverett? Filer's new. I thought Leverett played pretty good at left guard last year. I don't know why we necessarily brought in Filer to do that, but
that's my thing. Like those guys, like that offensive line, these guys need to be able to gel together. Even if it's one series, you got to be able to communicate and kind of feel each other out.
Yep.
And I'd rather not go into week 1 on the road, not knowing how to deal with each other in a very, very loud environment, right? Against a defense that's usually gets after you. They stop the run. They're not the best, but they're not a terrible defense in Minnesota. They're actually pretty aggressive. So I don't like that. But then the other side of the ball, like week 1 and 2, usually across the NFL, bad tackling. The Bucs, they haven't played their starters on defense either, outside of a handful of guys maybe. But I want to see Carlton Davis get his feet wet in tackling. I want to see guys other than Zion McCollum go out there and make tackles. Do I need to see Vita? Probably not. Do I need to see Levante, Devin? Probably not. But the other guys, I think like DBs take a little bit of time to like get their form right because you can't practice that. So that's going to kind of a lot of stuff that kind of works against you, yeah. But maybe Minnesota's going to go through the same thing. I don't know, but they've been together, so it's a little bit different.
Yeah, I think if anybody has like even a slight injury, I would sit them. Like Antoine had what looked like a little bit of a calf. He didn't practice it and like kind of walk through at the Giants facility. Savassier Dennis, he's got something going on where he wasn't practicing. So guys that have anything, I would kind of hold out and be on the safe side. But yeah, I would like to see guys, hit a little bit more because that's not something they typically do, especially full bore in practice. You see, I forget who blew him up, but like Rashad White gets hit, and it's like, all right, well, that's a story because he got hit like too hard.
Yeah.
Like I'd like to see a little bit more of that. What was surprising from the practices is at the Jets practice, there were 6 fights, which is a lot. Mike Evans said it was the most fights he's ever seen in a joint practice in his whole career. 2 of them were started by Levante David. One of them, he had his helmet off and was still charging the guy. So that's not a guy you would expect to start a fight. He's usually the guy that's like pulling guys off. He's a veteran. He's been through this. But he was getting the defense fired up, and people were ready to go with Levante getting in the mix. So as a fan, I love seeing that and shows me, maybe they are going to be a little bit feisty this year. But I think we got to think about the defense is still going to be good. Like we got good players. I think the run defense is going to be a little bit better. Everything I've heard about Kalijah Kancey is awesome. Hopefully he is ready for Minnesota. I think he will be. And, the defense is a Todd Bowles-led defense, which is usually pretty good. They got big guys to stop the run. Hopefully Logan Hall can step up a lot this year. That'll be something interesting to watch. But we got a team that's built to stop the run. So assuming we can, hold teams to, if we can hold them 20 points or under, I think we're going to have a decent shot in being most games. I would expect the offense, to be honest, to be a little bit better than last year. Not saying that we have better pieces, because I think whoever starts at quarterback is going to be a downgrade from Tom. But I think the balance with Dave Canales is going to be, and just the unpredictability is going to be a lot better than it was under Byron Leftwich.
The scheming, the layering of
Yes.
plays, the
Yep.
understanding of why you're calling this so you can call this later on. That's definitely going to be the upgrade. And I think that, not to say that they're better than Tom, they're going to play better because of these other moving parts and these things that are kind of outside of their
Yeah.
control. Whether they end up, making audibles more often at the line, I don't know how all that stuff works with Canales, but he's also a question mark, right? He's been in all these systems. He understands a lot. He's never called a game. So having these
Yep.
preseason games is really good for him. But then also having him in a preseason game calling with guys that he's going to work with is, I think, a little bit more important too, because you kind of get a feel for what these guys do and don't do well against stuff you can't do in preseason, stuff you can't do in training camp, stuff you can't do against other teams. So I'd love to hear what you think about not only him coming into this season, but kind of how he can develop slowly through the preseason and get his feet wet and get things to where he's kind of practicing it just as well as these guys are.
Sure. So Dave Canales is, in my mind, like a creative coach, right? Like if we had to, most of us hadn't heard of Seattle's quarterback coach before, this offseason. If you had to create an offensive coordinator after just having Byron Leftwich, you're going to want a guy that's fiery, that's energetic, that's a little bit new school, that sticks to the run a lot more, that has, some McVay influences, like that type of stuff, which he has. And he's like, a young guy, kind of what you want to see. And, he brought in his buddy Brad Idzik to be the receivers coach, who, seems to be pretty good too. That's what you want. So we have kind of the best way I can say it is just like a creative coach. Like that's what we have. We don't know if he's good or not. Like in game days, he hasn't called plays before. So, Baker said, and I believe Trask said too, like the play calling in the first game, like was pretty good. So hopefully that continues and he continues to rise, because I don't really see a ceiling for Dave Canales. Like if things go sideways this year, what have we seen from the Bucs in the last 10 years? Okay, Raheem Morris is a hot coordinator, young coordinator. He's going to go somewhere else. What do? We make him the head coach. We see things crumbling under Lovey, but the offense is doing really good. What do? They hire Dirk Cutter as the coach. So, similar with BA. BA is going to go out. Todd Bowles is doing an awesome job as a coordinator. Let's hire him as a coach. So I wouldn't be surprised if things go sideways this year, but the offense is good. Do we just hire Dave Canales as head coach? Like that would not shock me one bit. But we're far away from that, seeing as the guy's called 0 regular season games. But I'm just saying, like, his ceiling is so high because on paper he has everything you want. And listening to his press conferences and media and kind of how he interacts with guys and what the guys in the offense are saying, it all seems to be trending right. So hopefully, Dave Canales is the real deal. Hopefully the defense stays, in the upper echelon of the league under Todd Bowles. And we see like a sneakily competitive football team that can compete for the NFC South this year. So there's a lot of unknowns, but Dave Canales right now is doing everything you'd want him to do.
Dude, so listen, we met him at one of the practices we went to, shook his hand. Guy's got massive hands. Like, you would not think that he had the hands he had for his body. It's just, like, ridiculous. Energy through the roof. He was waiting for practice to start, but he was inside the cafeteria area, and every time the door would open and players would come in and out, you could see him just, like, bouncing around next to the door. He's like, he couldn't, like, a wrestler getting ready to fucking roll out, or, a fighter ready to take the ring. So he's got crazy good energy, and my thing has been, like, I think the defense is going to be fine. They're going to be like a top 5, top 7 defense, and I'm trying to not sound biased, but I really do think that. And so the offense only has to do so much better than what they did last year, and we would have won 5, 6 more games, honestly. So my thing is watching Canales is I think he'll start the season doing a pretty good job, but then at some point, 5, 6 weeks in, teams are going to start to adjust. Teams are going to start to get enough on you to know what you're doing. Does he have the next step now already has he been working on that? Does he know what he's going to do at that point? How does the offense, evolve at that? Like, he's talked about how he's teaching the guys and how he tells them to forget it, then we can start again. And I feel like he's kind of done that for himself as well, behind the scenes. I understand phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, 4 games at a time, whatever he wants to break it down at. So that's kind of my biggest thing. Could he be the head coach after one season? I think that would be crazy premature, even if he has like a top 5 offense. But man, that would be such a risk if everything does
I
fall
mean,
apart. But I
this
just
is
don't.
what we've seen in the last
I know, man.
did
It's
Raheem get
just
hired? 2008. So like the last 15 years, that has been the Bucs model. Like if there's a hot assistant coach that is doing well, keep him in house, make him the guy.
But if
We've
they have
seen
a
it the
top
last
five
three
defense,
regimes.
Che, but if they have a top five defense and they have a top 10 offense, I don't see this team going
Right.
off the rails at that point.
Yeah, that's true.
Unless the defense is the thing that absolutely just they fall apart and it goes fucking Lovey, not Lovey, but Mike Smith, and it's just like okay, you don't have
That's a
much of a
bit harder
choice.
to imagine though. Like a
That's
Todd Bowles led defense with the guys that we have in place, barring like a ton of guys going down, I can't see this defense bottoming out.
my biggest thing on the defense right now. The one thing I have circled, massive question mark that could be a thorn in our side when it comes to like the actual games themselves is that third corner, that slot guy, the nickel corner. Rondé Barber made it basically got those guys all paid when by the time he'd like made that such an amazing position in football. But like we don't really know what that is. They have a guy they
Right.
say that's kind of leading the team. That's who they think is going to be the dude. Zion McCollum is more of an outside corner, so he's more like a depth piece at this point. Curious what you think, how that plays out, and what you know of that guy. And you saw him in practice, and kind of seen how does he look? Are we going to see another gem that Jason Licht's found, or is this?
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, Izzian seems to have the stranglehold on that starting nickel corner. Like Zion McCollum, you'd like to see him be that guy. He's got the highest relative athletic score for a corner ever coming into the NFL. So like athleticism is not the problem. And we saw the interception he made against Pittsburgh. Like the guy is a super athlete, but can he cover and can he tackle, maybe even more importantly? I don't think that he's the most reliable in either of those. And that certainly leaves a weak spot in defense. And that's what offensive coordinators do. They find the weak spot in your defense and they attack it. And I think Bucs fans can foresee like a lot of guys picking a lot of offensives picking on Zion McCollum, and that's not what we want. Certainly, I hope he takes the next step. So far, it doesn't look like he's taken the next step to be a starter. But to his defense, like we've got two really, really good corners on the outside, and Carlton Davis and Jamel Dean. And then I would hope that he would win that nickel spot. But if Izzian comes in and he wins that, if we get another, like you said, like a diamond in the rough, like a late rounder undrafted guy, that's a win too. So hopefully whoever wins that job, can be at least what I would say solid and not be kind of like the sieve of the defense. What was encouraging and what the defense does rely on is the pass rush. And Shaq Barrett looked awesome this week. Like got after Aaron Rodgers, looked smooth going through the drills. In media availability afterwards saying that he feels great. This guy tore his Achilles in, I think it was like mid-October last year. And he's like, from just the eye tests, like pretty much back to full strength. So if we can get the Shaq Barrett of, 2020, 2021, like, or he wasn't having the best year before the injury, if we're being honest. If we can get, Shaq back to his old powers, that would be a huge win for this defense.
My thing too is the last year people picked on SMB, like that's what they did, and no matter how good everyone else around him played, they picked on SMB. So now we're back in a scenario where it looks like, depending on who that spot is, they're gonna pick on that spot again, like you're talking about, and it just that could end up derailing a lot of good team effort on that side of the ball.
That's to me one of the great mysteries of the Bucs last like 25 years is how come SMB didn't work out. I think he might have demanded a trade last year, but like he went from playing a lot of snaps and he had an interception in the wild card round, divisional round, and the NFC Championship game. Like made huge plays on our Super Bowl run. Jamel Dean passes him up on the depth chart. Jamel Dean had always been kind of a favorite of the coaching staff, and like athletically is just like in another stratosphere than almost anyone at that position.
Mm-hmm.
But then SMB gets like a bunch of like DNPs. Like I don't know what happened to a guy that was so young, so highly thought of, made so many plays, and then pretty much just out of the rotation. And now he's wearing number 0 for the Titans. Like, what happened?
Oh man, I was gonna say, I think he got in his head more than anything else. I think the thing with SMB is his confidence, and I think the fact that he would go in there and he would get picked on, he wouldn't play well. It it basically it derailed his career here at least. And then when he played well, he played confident the next game. He played with confidence throughout the playoffs, and he saw a different guy. If, like Tristan Wirfs talked about seeing a shrink, I mean, maybe SMB
Right.
should have thought about that too. But
Yeah.
dude, we heard so much about Shaq this week too, coming in off the edge, flying in on off these guys. I don't know if it's because the Jets' offensive line is so bad, but when we saw him, he looked fast. He looked like he wasn't really hurt coming off that. That's the ankle, or not the ankle, but that's the Achilles that he's pushing off on his pass rush.
Mhm.
Did he look like he was just fine? He looked like Shaq of
Yeah.
old. I mean, just fast as hell, dominating. I mean, that's a massive question mark in a piece that if he plays well, I could see JTS, who everyone kind of says this is the year, right?
Has to
Can
be.
can Shaq help JTS? Is where I'm kind of leading this to go here.
I hope so. I mean, Anthony Nelson has looked really good, but I think as Bucks fans, like if Anthony Nelson wins a starting job, that's probably not a good thing for the organization. I would think, just because we want to see like Joe Tryon-Shoyinka kind of, win that job that his draft slot showed that he should win. But he's going to need to finish at the quarterback, and he has some nice moves where he can get in the backfield quickly, but we just need to see those like actually converted 2 sacks. And hopefully this is the year, because he's got all the capabilities to get it done, but we need to actually see the production.
He's also got a new outside linebackers coach who I've harped on almost every episode this offseason, the guy from the Dallas Cowboys that they picked up,
Mm-hmm.
who I think ends up
With
being,
Micah Parsons, yeah.
yeah, if anyone's going to help him figure out that last piece of that equation, which is wrapping up the court, like he should have had 10 sacks last year. Should have had 10, 12 sacks the year before that. Just like he could have had a 5-sack game against the Patriots when Tom Brady was crying pregame. Like that would have been a mass, but he can't wrap it up. It's like, damn, dude. And at some point, you have to be able to finish that, especially when you're the defensive end or the outside linebacker. You're not the DT, you're not the guy trying to disrupt. You need to disrupt, finish, get a sack, fumble, create these plays that those guys hang their hats on. Otherwise, JTS probably not going to be here if he doesn't. Like, do you think this is the year for him? He's got to absolutely.
Has to be, like, because otherwise we're not picking up his 5th year option. Like, what's going on past this? So, or wait, no, he was the or
He was
no,
a fir- he was a
he was a first round pick. Logan Hall
first
was
round.
like the whatever first pick of the second round. So yeah, he would have the fifth year option that we have to decide on. And it's like, all right, what's going on with this guy? Like, is he ever going to take that step, or is he just kind of a rotational piece that we can put inside on passing downs?
I mean, my thing with him is Shaq's not going to be here forever. Regardless
No.
how he plays this season, eventually that Shaq that we know is just he. Eventually, you got to move on. And then
Mhm.
if you have a JTS that finally steps up, then you got Yaya Diaby, and then you got these. I think it's Ramirez that they picked up as well. These guys can play ball, and Yaya's a fucking freak, dude. This guy is such an alien. It's crazy. Like that dude's eventually going to get himself on the field, whether someone ahead of
Yeah.
him doesn't play well or not. They're gonna find a way to get him on the field. Same with Servassier Dennis. Like so.
Yep.
Go ahead.
I'm hearing some really good things about Yaya. I don't want to get too excited because it's really early and I know he's really raw, but everything I'm hearing says that he is in time going to be a player.
So man, if JTS steps up and you got Yaya coming in, now you got two young studs, and you're not
Yep.
rebuilding and trying to find that.
Right.
Since the Michael Bennett curse, I want to call it, or maybe the Simeon Rice curse. I'm not sure what it is, but we couldn't get a 10-sack guy for how long, Che? It was
Right.
JPP finally breaks that curse, even though we had somewhat talented guys, and then Shaq Barrett went on his run, obviously, but that'd be the
So,
best case scenario.
something I was talking about with a couple of beat writers this week, and I didn't fact check this. Simeon should be in the Hall of Fame. He has a resume to be. If he gets in the Hall of Fame, has any other defense had 5 Hall of Famers play on it at one time? I feel like the answer is no.
I think the answer is no. I don't think. I want to say 4 is a very limited number, if any.
Oh yeah, 4 is really limited too. Like,
Yeah.
but if you have 5, which would be if he gets in, Simeon, Sapp, Brooks, Lynch, Rondé, that's crazy.
That is crazy. And not only one at every level, but you got two at one of those levels. Like,
Yeah.
and I think some of that is like Simeon, that people think maybe he's not as good as he would have been if he didn't play with Sapp. But Sapp would
Mhm.
always say, like, there's no way either of us would not be in the Hall of Fame, even if we played separately. And so that makes me think, like, man, how does he not get in there? And he's not even in the conversation, dude. It's crazy.
Right.
But if you go back to the Ravens defense, that's considered the best defense of all time, even though the Bucs held their opponents to less and they scored more defensive touchdowns. But I don't think they can. Do they have four Hall of Famers on that team?
No, because Ed Reed wasn't there, but I think they had another safety who was or yeah, Rod Woodson, who's in the Hall of Fame. Chris McAllister, the top cornerback, is not. Ray Lewis was like the anchor of that. And then on defense, they had the two big nose tackles, Sam Adams, Tony Saragusa. And then off the edge, who was I think Jamie Sharp was an inside back. I don't remember who their edge rushers were, but they weren't like Hall of Fame guys.
Not household names, no.
Yeah.
But I mean, even what's his name, the safety you mentioned, he wasn't that he made his Hall of Fame case
And
before he became
yeah.
before he became a Raven, which is crazy from Pittsburgh to Baltimore, which happens
Yeah.
actually more often than people think, even though they hate each other. But yeah, I mean, what? It'd be pretty cool to have this kind of. We kind of see some of that happening here a little bit, or no? I mean, I think Antoine, now that he's going to get to play that spot that he's supposed to be at, and not so much kind of moving around everywhere. If he continues a specific trajectory, I could see him one day, like he's going to have to kind of become more of a playmaker, and he kind of says that all the time when they talk to him, and he's kind of acknowledged that now I'm in a spot where I can be a playmaker, and this is where I'm going to be. They're not going to move me around, so I could see that happening with him. Curious what you think of Antoine now going into this. I think it's his third year, right?
Yep.
Yeah, going into his third year now, more focused and being able to kind of be a leader back there, and I think a Pro Bowler, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, he wants to get paid. So I think he's in the right position to do it. I think safety, and he's alluded to it, free safety is his natural position. He's kind of everything you want. He is a little bit on the short side, but outside of that, I mean, you didn't see that being an issue when he's, Moss and Michael Pittman Jr. It was, we got 6 inches on him. So I don't think height is really an issue with him. He's got everything you want really at the position. So I think that he can continue to ascend, especially now that he's locked in at one role. I think we're a bit early on the like Hall of Fame stuff, but I mean, he started off his career with a bang. Obviously, the Super Bowl, he's got the signature moment. He's got, the interception over Pittman Jr., which is an incredible play. He's got a lot of things they like to see. He's got, the punch out on Jared Cook and the divisional round. So he has moments already in his career that could lead you eventually to Canton. We got to see a lot more from him over the years to get there, but certainly he's a guy who could one day be there. Levante, I would love to, say he's going to be a Hall of Fame. I don't think it's possible based on the number of Pro Bowls and like all pros that he has. I don't think that he's going to get there, which is unfortunate. I'm sure he's going to be a Ring of Honor guy. Devin, who knows what hit the rest of his career is going to be. Maybe he will be. I mean, if he plays like he did in the Super Bowl run and he, gets that, big deal, I could see him being a Hall of Fame guy one day, but, the book is very unwritten. Shaq, I would be surprised based on, he wasn't really a starter until later in his career, did lead the league in sacks in 2019, but, I don't think that automatically makes you a Hall of Famer. Vita, it's tough for nose tackles to get in.
He's gonna have to be more dominant.
Yeah, I mean he's a really good player, but I would be surprised if he's a gold jacket guy one day. I'd love to see him. He's my favorite guy to watch on tape. So I love watching Vita, and hopefully he can be there one day. But we got to see a little bit more consistency, even though he did lead the team in sacks last year. So I would love to see
Very
guys
low number though.
in, but it ain't easy to get in.
Yeah. So you talked a little bit about Devin. That was kind of my next thing. Devin White demands a trade in the offseason. The Bucs don't budge. There's a lot of behind the scenes shit that's really going on. Starts talking to Eagles players, flirting with a bunch of other teams, removes all his social media, the whole fucking deal that these guys do.
Yep.
He seems more focused. I saw that press conference he had last week. It felt very genuine. It felt like, he understood. He's humbled. He understood what was going on. The Bucs sat him down and said, "We got a plan for you. We've always had this plan. You got to work with us, yada, yada." What do you expect from him as a guy going into basically contract year, prove myself type of dude? And what do you expect from the Bucs if he does prove himself and how that whole scenario plays out? Levante's getting older. He's not getting younger. Could be on his way out eventually as a guy who retires at some point. Then you got Servassier Dennis, who everyone's raving about in camp and whatnot. So How do you think this whole not Levante, this the Devin White scenario kind of plays itself out throughout the season?
Yeah, I think it depends on his play. I mean, I could see, especially a guy like him with all the talent in the world, if he just needs to get his head right and focus for 17 games, he is the type of persona or personality to put up a big year in a contract year. Does he fall off after that? I think is the biggest concern, because I think Bucs fans worry is like, okay, if he balls out this year and we give him $100 million deal, are we getting the same guy next year? I think that's a valid concern. It is cool to hear Savastia Dennis is making plays and, intercepting the ball and all that stuff. So do you think about, okay, if Devin has a really good year and earns $100 million contract basically to be in the upper echelon of linebackers with the, Fred Warners, the Darius Leonard, the Shaq Leonard, whatever he's going by now. If he deserves that, do we feel comfortable paying him that if we got a guy who's making $1 million a year in Savastia Dennis that, he's not going to be as good, probably, but you get him on the cheap and you can reallocate those funds into other positions. I don't think that's the worst thing. So I think the best case scenario is Devin plays, his ass off and he earns a deal, hopefully in Tampa, and he can be like a franchise changing linebacker. He can be a Patrick Willis type guy who's here for a long time. But if not, he plays well and he walks, he gets a deal somewhere else. We get a very high compensatory pick, which would be, a third rounder pick in the, early to mid 90s. That wouldn't be the worst case scenario either. So there's the best case scenario for everyone is Devin White plays well, and I hope he does. And I hope he gets paid, whether it's here or elsewhere.
They really did a good job by drafting Servassier, and not only just drafting him,
Yeah.
but having him come into camp and make plays and show that he's not a linebacker that only can do one of two things, which is rush the pass or stop the run or go into coverage. Apparently, he can do all of those things. And if Devin doesn't pan out, or Devin demands way more money than the Bucs are comfortable paying him, a lot of these guys do fall off after that contract. It's not a knock on him. It's just how it
Yeah.
works. But you have Levante David there. You could probably talk him into staying one more year, keep helping development with Servassier, and then kind of pass him the torch like he's done with Devin. Devin has gained ridiculous amounts of knowledge and experience and just stuff in the film room, not only from Todd, but from Levante. So I could see Levante, they kind of set it up to where they could go either of two routes, or Levante ends up being the guy, odd man out. Hey, man, sorry, thank you so much. It just happens, veteran guys. If you have a Servassier and you have Devin, now Devin's the guy in the room. I think it's a good scenario. What turned to be a pretty shitty scenario before the draft ended up being, okay, this is not that bad.
Yep. I would be surprised if they kept Devin after this year and they let Levante go. Like I don't think that's even really an option. I think Levante is gonna be a one jersey guy. Like him and Mike Evans, I don't anticipate that they're just gonna finish their career as Buccaneers. Same with Will Golston. Like they're just gonna be Buccaneers for life, and that's kind of it. So while Devin certainly is important, I can't picture, and I'm sure his contract would be bigger than Levante's, but I don't know that he would be prioritized as far as all right, we have to sign this guy first, over Levante, despite Levante's age.
It's more my saying of, if Levante doesn't want to come back, if Levante says, you know what, I've proven everything I could possibly prove, like these guys,
Yep.
a lot of that stuff kind of just pops up.
Yeah.
That maybe they might be hoping for that to happen at some point if Devin plays ridiculously well and they got this guy. I think Dennis ends up getting on the field somehow, some way. They get him on there. He ends up shining, and I think he's going to play well. And then you got a really good problem, but you also got a problem at the same time. So, all right, before we wrap this up, Cheah, going into tomorrow's preseason game, do you have three things that you're going to be looking at, three guys you're watching, things that you're concerned about, or things, question marks you need answered by the end of tomorrow's preseason game, which is a lot to ask for, but it's,
Sure. I mean, I think everyone's going to be looking at Kyle Trask. Like, how is he going to do? This is his first start. For some reason, we only gave him 9 passes against Atlanta in a regular season game last year. We need to see more of Kyle Trask. He's going to start the game with the starters that will play. So how is he going to do? This is his big audition for the organization, for the fans, to show that we've got a guy, because I don't think that we want to see a second round pick from 2021 a guy that we invested, premium draft capital in, not really amount to anything more than a backup quarterback. So we'd like to see some growth, even if he's not the starter going into the year. Even if he doesn't play this year, I want to have some confidence. Like, okay, like if things go down, like Jason Light said at a press conference, I think it was at the combine, like Kyle Trask, and this was before the Saints acquired Derek Carr, but like he said, like, I think Kyle Trask is the best quarterback in the division, which, all right,
That's a big thing
it
to say.
doesn't seem like he's the best quarterback on the team yet. And we didn't have Baker Mayfield at the time, and that's fair, but like, I would like to see some action and with Kyle Trask. So hopefully he shows out. I think we're obviously watching Trey Palmer, seeing if he can really continue his ascension. Obviously, having a really good camp, burnt Sauce a couple times against the Jets. Is Sauce gonna play? Are they gonna be matched up? I don't know. So we'll see, but hopefully he can have another good showing. Rachaad White's not going to play. I'm interested to see how the backfield kind of shakes out. Um, Chase Edmonds was pretty surprising in the first preseason game. Like, is he going to get the number 2 job? Sean Tucker's a guy who seems like, he had the issue at the combine with the heart, and he seems to be like fully, ready to go. I think he is a pretty good shot to make the team. So I like to see him. And then I think everybody's just going to be watching the right side of the offensive line. Like, what's going on? Cody Mock, Luke Gedeke, they're going to play a lot. How are they going to play? Like,
It's going to be a little bit of overreaction on that too, I think. A little
yeah,
bit.
I mean, Gedeke, I think, struggled last week. When I talked to people that know more than I do about football, they were like, listen, like he had like 1 or 2 bad reps. Like he was fine. Like, let's not blow it out of proportion. And they're still really high on him. But the fact of the matter is, like, the Bucs kind of have a lot riding on Luke Gedeke this year.
Yes.
If he doesn't pan out, what's the plan? Like, we moved an all pro bowl, young stud Tristan Wirfs over from the right side, the left side, potentially damage his confidence. And, I don't know that we're going to see the same level of play initially, at least on the right side, the left side. Hopefully we do, and there's no issue, but you're risking, a pretty large asset there to move to the right to the left. And then if Gedeke's not what we hope he is or hope he's going to be, then like that's kind of not only is that a potential failed experiment with premium draft capital, but now maybe you need to reverse course with Tristan and move him back. Like there's a lot, and obviously if he doesn't work out and there's pressure on Baker or Trask or whoever's throwing the ball at the time, that's a premium position that you really need to be certain with. So I think that
my big thing with that was that you had one problem, left tackle, and then when you move him, you have a risk there that you may create 2 problems now. Now you could create Tristan Wirfs may not be amazing and may not be good enough, and now you've created 2 problems. And if Gedeke fails, like what do? You're kind of back at square one. It's kind of I hope he works out, but every time I watch guys that know more than, like you're saying, they keep saying his arms are too short. His arms are too short to be a tackle. And sometimes you're like, maybe that doesn't matter. And then others, I thought he had a terrible game. People who know way more like, listen, hey, he didn't have a bad game actually. But in my mind, if you're maybe starting right tackle in the NFL, you don't lose a single rep to anyone who's a backup. So I'm hoping the Jets play their starting defense. Not only for Trask and Palmer, but also for these guys to kind of get their feet wet on the offensive line. I'd love for them to play it as a unit, but not anything I can change.
I think they had 9 sacks against the Panthers last week. I don't know. We need to see all the starters. Just let's let our guys have some confidence.
I know, but I think losing a rep is not the worst thing. You learn more from that. You don't learn as much from winning a rep. That's just how I see it. But Cheah, awesome having you on, man. Let people know what you got going on, not only this coming week, but throughout the season at Barstool.
Sure. So we got a lot of fun stuff. I'm moving to Chicago next week with, my whole family's moving, and we'll be doing some fun stuff in the Chicago office. Tonight, though, is Rough and Rowdy. It's boxing in amateur boxing in West Virginia. It's going to be awesome. We got a bunch of guys on the card, 20 fights. Buy rnr.com. It's $20. It's going to be a very entertaining evening. So I'm about to go watch that. It's going to be a great night. So Sammer, thanks for having me on the show. I know Christian was wrapped up with a few things, and then Stank you know, lightning hits his house. What can you do about that? But
That's bad
this
luck,
was
dude.
fun. I'm glad we got to catch up.
Yeah, this was awesome. Way more football talk than usual. But to everybody who's watching, super chatted, and everybody in the comments and chat section, make sure you hit the like button, hit that subscribe button, leave a comment. Let me know what you guys are watching for tomorrow night. I'm going to be back on Bleacher Report's post-game live stream in the app. So if you're a Bucs fan and you've liked the Bucs as your favorite team on there, I will pop up on your timeline. Join me on there. We'll have some cool polls, some cool chat interaction. And as always, go Bucs.
Welcome to Tampa.